Bon voyage,
Kresner said behind me, but I didn't bother to look back. I approached the railing, but I didn't look down. Not yet. I began to do deep breathing. It's not really an exercise at all, but a form of self-hypnosis. With every inhale-exhale, you throw a distraction out of your mind, until there's nothing left but the match ahead of you. I got rid of the money with one breath, and Kresner himself with two. Marcia took longer. Her face kept rising in my mind, telling me not to be stupid, not to play his game, that maybe Kresner never welched, but he always hedged his bets. I didn't listen. I couldn't afford to. If I lost this match, I wouldn't have to buy the beers and take the ribbing. I'd be so much scarlet sludge splattered for a block of Diekman Street in both directions. When I thought I had it, I looked down. The building sloped away like a smooth chalk cliff to the street far below. The cars parked there looked like the Matchbox models you can buy in the 5 and dime. The ones driving by the building were just tiny pinpoints of light. If you fell that far, you'd have plenty of time to realize just what was happening, to see the wind blowing your clothes as the earth pulled you back faster and faster. You'd have time to scream a long, long scream. And the sound you made when you hit the pavement would be like the sound of an overripe watermelon. I looked at the ledge. It looked small. I had never seen 5 inches that looked so much like 2. At least the building was fairly new. It wouldn't crumble under me. I hoped. I swung over the railing and carefully lowered myself until I was standing on the ledge. My heels were out over the drop. The floor on the balcony was about chest high, and I was looking into Kresner's penthouse through the wrought iron ornamental bars, watching me the way a scientist watches a guinea pig to see what the latest injection will do.
Goodbye, Mr. Norris. I'll see you in a bit.
It was time to do it. Talking was done. I let myself think of Marcia one last time. Her light brown hair, her wide gray eyes, her lovely body, and then put her out of my mind for good. No more looking down either. It would have been too easy to get paralyzed, looking down through that space. Too easy to just freeze up until you lost your balance or just fainted from fear. It was time for tunnel vision. Time to concentrate on nothing but left foot, right foot. I began to move to the right, holding on to the balcony's railing as long as I could. It didn't take long to see I was going to need all the tennis muscles my ankles had. With my heels beyond the edge, those tendons would be taking all my weight. I got to the end of the balcony, and for a moment I didn't think I was going to be able to let go of that safety. I forced myself to do it. 5 inches. Hell, that was plenty of room. If the ledge were only a foot off the ground instead of 400 feet, you could breeze around this building in 4 minutes flat, I told myself. So just pretend it is. Yeah, and if you fall from a ledge a foot off the ground, you just say rats and try again. Up here, you get only one chance. I slid my right foot farther, and then brought my left foot next to it. I let go of the railing. I put my open hands up, allowing the palms to rest against the rough stone of the apartment building. I caressed the stone. I could have kissed it. A gust of wind hit me, snapping the collar of my jacket against my face, making my body sway on the ledge. My heart jumped into my throat and stayed there until the wind had died down. A strong enough gust would have peeled me right off my perch and sent me flying down into the night, and the wind would have been stronger on the other side. I turned my head to the left, pressing my cheek against the stone. Kresner was leaning over the balcony, watching me.
Enjoying yourself?
He asked affably. He was wearing a brown camel's hair overcoat. I thought you didn't have a coat, I said.
A little psychological warfare, eh, Mr. Norris? I should tell you not to linger over long. The ankles grow tired, and if they should give way...
He took an apple out of his pocket, bit into it, and then tossed it over the edge. There was no sound for a long time. Then, a faint and sickening plop. Kresner chuckled. He had broken my concentration, and I could feel panic nibbling at the edges of my mind with steel teeth. A torrent of terror wanted to rush in and drown me. I turned my head away from him and did deep breathing, flushing the panic away. I was looking at the lighted bank sign, which now said 846, time to save at Mutual. By the time the lighted numbers read 849, I felt that I had myself under control again. I think Kresner must have decided I'd frozen, and I heard a sardonic patter of applause when I began to shuffle toward the corner of the building again. I began to feel the cold. The lake had wetted the edge of the wind. Its clammy dampness bit at my skin like an auger. My thin jacket billowed out behind me as I shuffled along. I moved slowly, cold or not. If I was going to do this, I would have to do it slowly and deliberately. If I rushed, I would fall. The bank clock read 8:52 when I reached the corner. It didn't appear to be a problem. The ledge went right around, making a square corner. But my right hand told me there was a crosswind. If I got caught leaning the wrong way, I would take a long ride very quickly. I waited for the wind to drop, but for a long time it refused to, almost as though it were Kresner's willing ally. It slapped against me with vicious, invisible fingers, prying and poking and tickling. At last, after a particularly strong gust had made me rock on my toes, I knew that I could wait forever and the wind would never drop all the way off. So the next time it sank a little, I slipped my right foot around and, clutching both walls with my hands, made the turn. The crosswind pushed me 2 ways at once, and I tottered. For a second, I was sickeningly sure that Kresner had won his wager. Then, I slid a step further along and pressed myself tightly against the wall, a held breath slipping out of my dry throat. That was when the raspberry went off, almost in my ear. Startled, I jerked back to the very edge of balance. My hands lost the wall and pinwheeled crazily for balance. I think that if one of them had hit the stone face of the building, I would have been gone. But after what seemed an eternity, gravity decided to let me return to the wall instead of sending me down to the pavement 43 stories below. My breath sobbed out of my lungs in a pained whistle. My legs were rubbery. The tendons in my ankles were humming like high-voltage wires. I had never felt so mortal. The man with the sickle was close enough to read over my shoulder. I twisted my neck, looked up, and there was Kresner, leaning out of his bedroom window 4 feet above me. He was smiling. In his right hand, he held a New Year's Eve noisemaker.
Just keeping you on your toes,
he said. I didn't waste my breath. I couldn't have spoken above a croak anyway. My heart was thudding crazily in my chest. I sidled 5 or 6 feet along just in case he was thinking about leaning out and giving me a good shove. Then I stopped and closed my eyes and deep breathed until I had my act back together again. I was on the short side of the building now. On my right, only the highest towers of the city bulked above me. On the left, only the dark circle of the lake, with a few pinpricks of light which floated on it. The wind whooped and moaned. The crosswind at the second corner was not so tricky, and I made it around with no trouble. And then something bit me. I gasped and jerked. The shift of balance scared me, and I pressed tightly against the building. I was bitten again. No, not bitten, but pecked. I looked down. There was a pigeon standing on the ledge, looking up with bright, hateful eyes. You get used to pigeons in the city. They're as common as cab drivers who can't change a tin. They don't like to fly, and they give ground grudgingly, as if the sidewalks were theirs by squatters' rights. Oh, yes, and you're apt to find their calling cards on the hood of your car. But you never take much notice. They may be occasionally irritating, but they're interlopers in our world. But I was in his, and I was nearly helpless, and he seemed to know it. He pecked my tired right ankle again, sending a bright dart of pain up my leg. "Get!" I snarled at it. "Get out!" The pigeon only pecked me again. I was obviously in what he regarded as his home. The section of the ledge was covered with droppings, old and new. A muted cheeping from above. I cricked my neck as far back as it would go and looked up. A beak darted at my face, and I almost recoiled. If I had, I might have become the city's first pigeon-induced casualty. It was Mama Pigeon, protecting a bunch of baby pigeons just under the slight overhang of the roof. Too far up to peck my head, thank God. Her husband pecked me again, and now blood was flowing. I could feel it. I began to inch my way along again, hoping to scare the pigeon off the ledge. No way. Pigeons don't scare, not city pigeons anyway. If a moving van only makes them amble a little faster, a man pinned on a high ledge isn't going to upset them at all. The pigeon backpedaled as I shuffled forward, his bright eyes never leaving my face except when the sharp beak dipped to peck my ankle. And the pain was getting more intense now. The bird was pecking at raw flesh, and eating it, for all I knew. I kicked at it with my right foot. It was a weak kick, the only kind I could afford. The pigeon only fluttered its wings a bit and then returned to the attack. I, on the other hand, almost went off the side. The pigeon pecked me again. A cold blast of wind struck me, rocking me to the limit of balance. Pads of my fingers scraped at the bland stone, and I came to rest with my left cheek pressed against the wall, breathing heavily. Kressner couldn't have conceived of worse torture if he had planned it for 10 years. One peck was not so bad. 2 or 3 were little more. But that damned bird must have pecked me 60 times before I reached the wrought iron railing of the penthouse opposite Kressner's. Reaching that railing was like reaching the gates of heaven. My hands curled sweetly around the cold uprights and held on as if they would never let go. Peck. The pigeon was staring up at me almost smugly with its bright eyes, confident of my impotence and its own invulnerability. I was reminded of Kressner's expression when he had ushered me out onto the balcony on the other side of the building. Gripping the iron bars more tightly, I lashed out with a hard, strong kick and caught the pigeon squarely. It emitted a wholly satisfying squawk and rose into the air, wings flapping. A few feathers, dove gray, settled back to the ledge or disappeared slowly down into the darkness, swan-boating back and forth in the air. Gasping, I crawled up onto the balcony and collapsed there.